Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 63 of the OG Technically Trek. I am your humble host, Dave Prime, and over there on my right is the Ditzy Witch, Captain Katie. How are you doing, my dear?
I am recovering.
Yeah,
But
tell us
I'm
more. We
okay.
talked about it a bit backstage. If you want to take a minute or two to talk about another great sci-fi franchise, Stargate SG. Well, SG-1 specifically, based on the actors that you got to meet in person, which I am insanely jealous because I have not gotten to meet any of them yet.
Yes, last weekend I went to a 3-day Stargate convention down in London, and it was absolutely amazing. The main guests that were there were from SG1 and Atlantis. And I got to meet Michael Shanks, Richard Dean Anderson, Tori Higginson, Gary Jones,
Oh, Siler.
David
Poor
Nichol, um, who else? And a few others as well. But it was absolutely amazing. The cosplay there was insane. And actually, two of the cosplayers from a big group that go around all the conventions, all the Stargate conventions, they looked the spitting image of Braytak and Teal.
that is
Um,
cool.
their costumes were absolutely amazing. But you know, it really was an experience. And the final panel of the weekend was between Michael Shanks and Richard Dean Anderson, and it
Oh,
was absolutely hilarious.
oh, you
Um,
we talked about it backstage. And I don't think Tyson was there yet, so it's too good to share. It's so good. It got it.
yeah, I will share this. One of the questions that were asked to Richard Dean Anderson was, out of the three, you, Richard Dean Anderson, Jack O'Neill, and MacGyver, who do you think is best at DIY? And he was so confused, bless him. I mean, he's getting on in years, but he's just, you know, he's absolutely amazing. He's just like, DIY? What DIY? Can someone tell me what that is? And somebody explained, obviously, odd jobs around the home, DIY stands for do it yourself. And he sat there, an exaggerated thinking face on, tapping the microphone against his mouth. And he looked to is right to Michael Shanks, and they kept looking at the audience, and then he just blurted out, "Well, Richard Dean Anderson has to do it himself because he's single." And honestly, that just broke everyone. It was basically like no fucks given at this convention and in the panels, like topics of conversation. But that then led to Richard Dean Anderson talking about fan fiction, about threesomes and foursomes between the characters. Oh, honestly, it was so fun, and it was absolutely amazing. And I mean, Nicole DeBoer was there as well. Even though she's only in one episode of Atlantis, I mean, obviously, we all love her as Esri Dax.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
thought you did more than one episode though.
no, she was only in one episode of Atlantis. But she was so lovely. I think it was after the cosplay contest on the Saturday, Nicole and David Nichol were still talking to me and some of the cosplayers outside of the main hall for about 20 minutes, just having a general chit chat. And it was just so lovely. When I went to not the fan meet, the meet and greet on the Friday evening, Gary Jones was the last one to come to our table, and he was sat at our table for about half an hour,
Hmm.
just talking away, and he didn't want to leave. But yeah, it was so good. Um, I mean, if anybody who's watching has got me on Facebook, all my photos are on Facebook. But it really was lovely, and all of the guests. And I asked all of the guests my biscuit question. I asked them all my biscuit question, and they absolutely loved it. Yeah, and I wrote their answers down this time.
There you go.
I have all of their answers. So yeah, it was a very, very fun weekend, and I was stewarding as well. So I got to see everybody have their photos taken, and some of them were so funny. And yeah, so yeah, it was a good weekend. So I've been recovering since then. Um,
Maybe you brush shoulders with K70 because it's 1 a.m. where he's at, so he's like in your neck of the woods, I think. So, but yeah, he's got a great animated series on YouTube called Star Trek Defiant, which I've haven't had a chance to sit and watch a lot of them, but I've watched some of the teasers and whatnot. It's good. It's different. I like it. It's saying, yeah, hopefully I'll get to that point with that number of subscribers because we've been doing this. This week we have been doing this on YouTube for a year now.
Yay! Happy anniversary to woo!
Yeah, saying so. It just it's been a journey. Like with my sobriety, it's been a long road getting from there to here. But saying there's still a lot more we can do to do better. So hopefully, what we're going to be focusing our topic for most of this month might generate some more viewers. I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens and hope for the best. But before we do that, I just, of course, got to give my little plug to the partnership I have with Dubby. They do energy drinks. They got great little tumblers too, like this one. They're saying, I would date this guy. I don't know why. But he's cute. I like him. But they got a lot of great. They got a lot of great flavors. They got a new one that's just released that you mix with milk, and it's s'mores. So that is definitely one flavor I'm definitely going to order and try. But if you go to your website w.gg and enter in the code TechTrek TEKTREK, you get 10% off your order. Any of the bundle deals that they have, that code might not work, but if you make your own bundle sort of thing, you can get going with that. But as I was mentioning, is saying we're going to talk about influential characters in the Star Trek franchise. I was thinking about doing Captain Picard to start off things this month, but then I realized that unofficially June 16th, someone put down based on the star date, June 16th is Captain Picard Day. So I thought it would be only fitting that we have talked about Captain Picard on Captain Picard Day. So yeah, so I figure let's start with Janeway. Say Captain Janeway, she's thrusted 70,000 light years to the other end of the galaxy with no support, no hardly any resources. I mean, she was. Sorry, my allergies are finally starting to rear their ugly head, so definitely apologies in advance. So allergies suck. Let's say I'll be talking to my doctor again on the 17th of this month to see if I can get any antihistamines that don't mess with my medication or other things. But yeah, say Janeway's off in the other end of the quadrant. Got to make an uneasy alliance with a bunch of Maquis that have rebelled against the Federation. They want nothing to do with the Federation. They don't believe in the Federation. They believe the Federation has abandoned them, and now they're forced to integrate into the crew. And Janeway has to delegate what needs to be done to get their crew home and get them home safely. And hopefully they can take less than 70 years to pull it off, which obviously they did. And yes, so what I am going to do is I got a couple people backstage, Tyson and Travis. How's it going, guys? And
Pretty
Travis,
good.
you are muted, just so you know.
And
thank you.
if we could start by allowing me to make just a brief statement, if I may.
Of course.
Thank you.
Fans of the show know.
Dave noted, and so I went and checked out another show that is also using the name technically Trek. The show is less than a year old. We've been on more than a year. We've demonstrably had the name technically Trek for longer. And it's not a bad show. I watched it. I did ask, just because I was curious, hey, do you guys know there's another technically Trek? Are you associated with it? And one of the three commentators there said, "Oh, I don't know about it." And one of them said, "Oh, I think I know, but ours is better." And I just want to point out that we're a Star Trek community. Let's support each other.
Exactly.
Let's not say that your show is better than ours. This is a great show. We are growing. We don't have, maybe as many followers as subscribers, but we have people who are loyal and like the show, and I'm one of them. I love this show. And
Same
as
here.
Star Trek family, let's support each other. I wouldn't even mind some cross pollination. If some of your subscribers watch this show, if some of our subscribers watch yours, build each other up rather than making snide comments. In the Star Trek,
Mhm.
I mean that's just who I feel the Star Trek community. We should be better than that. So if you're going to continue to use the name, we have no problem with you sharing the name. Just please, let's be nice to each other. And so that's the statement I'd like to make.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's kind of why I started the show. We are the OG technically Trek.
Yeah, I mean, if it was like a genuine, a genuine, they came
Coincidence. It probably
between
was.
them, yeah,
Yeah.
it. But the fact that one of them has says, "Oh, I think I know, but ours is better." I'm sorry, but I don't, I don't like theft. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Paige has got
That
that
was unnecessary. It could have just been, oh yeah,
right.
there is another show called Technically Trek, and
Yeah, because
left it at that. That would have been fine.
and I did my due diligence. I made sure looked at every nook and cranny on Google if there's another podcast like it, and I at one point
Yeah,
I was looking for alternate names, and of course, trying to find an
Yeah.
alternate name for Star Trek podcast, it's not easy.
Right.
you
And
see, the thing
this
is,
was perfectly named. Yeah.
well, yeah, it is, and that's why we're called technically track, because we do go off track, and we like that's technically part of it, but we always circle back. And when we do veer off, it may be away from Trek itself, but it's still in relation to that topic. And we have a laugh. We are very laid back. We are very relaxed. And regardless of where we are, there is always going to be worse podcasts, better podcasts, ones that are on par with our own. It's the same with everything. There's always a better song out there, but there again, there's always a worse song out there. Same with TV shows, movies. You know, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we all and I'm gonna, bounce off what Tyson said. We are all part of the Trek community, and there is no need for any animosity, no name calling, no, oh, we're better than you, because that's just childish. And I'm quite happy to say that. That kind of attitude is childish, and there's no need for it, and like Paige said, respect, love, and dream with kindness.
And I
Yeah.
think that's exactly right. That's what we should do. I believe it was Sunday night. It was yesterday. It was around 6 p.m. that I tuned in. So that might be when their show airs Sunday at 6, or maybe it's earlier and I just came late. But I will go back. I'll continue to watch their show. I want to see. I don't know if they're going to watch our show. Hopefully, one of them is watching this, and the takeaway is let's be friends. Let's cross pollinate. Let's help build each other up. Let's not talk about who's better. We're a Trek community, and we're supposed to love and honor each other, and I think that's what we do here. So enough about that. I don't want to linger on that. I just wanted to put that out there.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Saying, and I threw this episode together at the last minute, trying to figure out what to do, what episode to watch, with my with my schedule is many know, just I got AA meetings on Monday nights, Tuesday nights, Friday nights, and 2 on Saturday, and then another one on Sunday. So I mean, I got a rather full plate of those meetings, and saying trying to juggle all that, trying to juggle my daytime job and trying to do all this. It can be overwhelming sometimes. I can't My brain just doesn't want to focus, can't focus on everything all at once, and it's frustrating and embarrassing to admit it, but I just got to own up to it. And saying so, but with my broadcasting background, you'd think I would be better, but
At least
don't
things
take
go
this
sideways sometimes.
first of all, don't take this personally. Every show, starts from grassroots, and each I've noticed as I go back and look at some of the older shows, how much better it's gotten over the year. With your credits, with your music, with the topics, the way you stay on track, and it's only going to get better the more you do this. And so we're building, we're learning, we're growing together, and we're going to make this into a fine show with lots of subscribers. It's going to take time, and that's just the way things are. Just a quick plug for Dangerous Thoughts. It may be coming back in late June this month. I have a
Yay!
meeting with Manu later in the week, and there's some artwork and concepts floating around. Different shows. Of course, we're going to have Dangerous Thoughts Television, or DTTV. For those of you who don't know, Manu Intiraymi is the actor who played Icheb in Star Trek Voyager. So he's the creative mind behind this. So really excited about this. To
Yeah,
Captain
I'm
Janeway, speaking of Voyager.
yeah. So looking forward to getting some DT back under my belt. So that's going to be my Wednesday evening fill-in. Since I moved to Monday, you guys took my Wednesday slot, so it works out perfectly because he wanted to do it on a day other than Sunday. So
Perfect. And you'll
And
notice Travis and I both have our Voyager badges on and not the TNG badge.
yeah, my
So
TNG badge is still on my fridge, but it's like
but also, I mean, I can't wait for DT to come back. I
oh,
also do
me
need to
too.
speak to Manu. So can you just relay that? But I need to speak to him in regards to the show linking with my blog. Because that will also be returning, Katie's Corner. But also, Paige is chomping at the bit to see Dangerous Thoughts back.
Oh,
Because Paige is new to the DT family, and she's seen little bits of previous episodes, and she likes what she sees, and she can't wait to start seeing the new stuff that we're going to be doing.
yeah, a lot of exciting stuff coming. More than just one weekly show. There's going to be some pre-recorded, very professional. $40,000 has been spent on the studio and some of the equipment, and so really, really excited to bring DT TV. And technically, Trek may actually. I know Dave is working with Cassie, and may actually move to the DT TV channel. So this show may end up moving to the Dangerous Thoughts television network.
well, that'll
So
definitely hopefully help with some
that'll
subscribers.
yes, that'll
That
really boost subscriptions because we have over 1,000 subscribers and growing.
Yes, and a lot of them are Ichib fans, so hopefully that might
Yes,
get some more going. And we actually had Manu on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about an episode Q2, so that was a lot of
well,
fun.
that was the episode he was in with Q. Yeah, Q2 with Q Junior,
Yeah.
John Delancey's son. Janeway, Captain Kathryn Janeway. I want to start by saying, um, I watched every single episode of Next Gen DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise as they aired, because of course every time a new Star Trek came on, this was back in broadcast television. There was no streaming
Mm-hmm.
service, and so you actually had to have a TV guide. You had to know when it was going to be on. You had
What
to,
channel?
bookmark. You didn't have a smartphone, so you had to write something on the calendar like Star Trek tonight, 6 p.m. And so remember UPN, the United Paramount
Yeah.
Network, and it was their flagship show. So I always made a point, when it first aired, and I have to tell you, captain, when you watch a brand new Star Trek for the first time, you're always, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but a little overcritical, right? I'm like, okay, I'm used to Kirk. I'm used to Picard. I'm used to Benjamin Sisko. Now, here's the very first female captain. Am I going to like it or not?
Mhm.
And over the 7 seasons, never missed an episode. Um, she never failed to impress me. What an amazing actress. Kate Mulgrew, I can't say enough about her, and just what a brilliant captain she made. Was
We're
our
not
TVs in
that
black and white? Okay.
technically. Honestly, the first TV my parents got me in the late '80s was a black and white TV to play the Atari with, and what the
My
Atari
TV in the
7800.
70s was black and white. I grew up in 1973 is when I was born, and so we had a black and white TV at my house before we got a color. I remember when my dad brought a 19-inch color television. It was huge, 19 inches, and it had little rabbit ears, and it had full color. The TV we had before was smaller in black and white, and it had the old channel selectors. It wasn't digital. It would click, click, click. Um,
That was my model.
and of course, because I guess I'm a hillbilly, I don't know, but the working TV sat on top of an older console television that didn't work. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we lived some interesting times in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah,
Growing,
but too, I
we're old.
not only did that the black and white TV that we had the rabbit ears, we used aluminum foil to help boost the signal because we only got one channel locally. So if we wanted to get any channels from up north in Spokane, yeah, I needed that
Oh, I didn't waste the
extra
aluminum
oomph.
foil on the antenna. I always wore that on my head just to make sure the aliens couldn't read my thoughts.
But yeah, Janeway though, I mean, I mean, as you put it, saying she she fit the pants, and saying she was upholding the ideals of the Federation, and much to the chagrin to a lot of the alien cultures that they ran across, and notably the Kazon. Hmm.
She had a fine line to walk, though. I mean, she
Oh
had to
yeah,
have all the power and strength of Picard and Kirk, but still have the emotions and the femininity of a woman, and trying to balance that. Boy, that was a tightrope, and she walked it perfectly.
oh yeah.
Now, I just want to say, now everybody knows that I was a late starter to Trek, and I actually didn't start watching Voyager until the entire 7 seasons had already finished. But when I will admit that when I first started watching Voyager, I thought, oh shit, we're going to have another Cisco here. And she grew so much over those 7 seasons. And in my opinion, because of the circumstances that Janeway had to face with being slung to the other end of the galaxy, she had the biggest challenge out of all of the captains in a way. And she had the biggest character growth without losing her core beliefs and without losing herself along the way. There were times, yes, when she did cross certain lines, but never without compromising herself. And yes, she did. She was very pompous at first with upholding the Prime Directive, and she always, regardless of any circumstances, she always tried her best to uphold the Prime Directive. But there were other times when she had no choice but to be a little loosey goosey with the rules. And, it the entire crew, the growth, the character development with all of them was a beautiful thing to see, and it was so lovely to be on that journey of development with them. And that is why Voyager is my favorite series out of a lot of them, because it was different. We got to meet new alien species, and it the mingling of the crew, the Marquis and Starfleet, like mingling together and joining as one. Even though it was a rough ride, it worked, and I think that was one of the things that allowed Janeway to relax a little bit more with everything. And they really did become a family out there.
Mm.
And the show had to be like you had Next Generation, which was like Star Trek in that they went to a different planet every episode, and it was episodic, and they had those adventures, right? It was the continuing adventures of the Enterprise. So with DS9, they did something totally different. They had a stationary base station. All the drama came to them. So when Voyager came out, how do we not have a stationary station, but not just a repeat of Next Gen? So the idea is they were flung into the Delta Quadrant where there was no Starfleet. So it's kind of a hybrid of, yeah, it's new planets and new situations every week, but they don't have Starfleet backup. They're all alone. They're going to have to do this all on their own. And so that made it kind of exciting. It made the show unique and different. It also tested Starfleet ideals. When you have no friends and you're in danger, do you still hold to the Prime Directive and the ideals? And we saw in Equinox Part 1 and 2, another Starfleet captain that didn't, that said, basically, look, we're on our own. F Starfleet, we're going to do what we have to do, even if it means, killing some alien species to power our ship. And and you could see, so there was definitely that moral, that ethical test that was going on that we see a lot in Star Trek, and I love that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought Equinox up. That was one of the episodes I was going to
Yeah.
talk about because she was walking that tightrope, saying, "How far do I have to go to get Ransom back in line without like doing anything drastic?" So say he's a human. It's like first human contact in 5 years, and say, but it's just like, she started to go towards the deep end, and Chakotay was able to rein her back a little bit. But that's one of the times where she was a hard ass, especially with the surviving members of the Equinox crew. She had no qualms just stripping them of their rank, and she's like, you know what? You guys fucked up. You're going to be at the lowest of the lower decks. You got to earn our trust back.
I wish they'd have
You
followed
see,
up so we could have seen what happened,
Yeah.
like they did with the Maquis. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
you see, after seeing Equinox, that was the moment where I gained so much. Now, I already had a lot of respect for Janeway, but it was during that double episode where my respect for Janeway went through the roof, because it was all, in a way, it was. Now that episode, I always kind of see that as like not like a mirror universe episode, but kind of like a mirror effect episode, because the crew of Voyager could have gone down the same route and gone down the any means necessary, we're out on our own, we need to get home, screw everybody else. But they didn't. And even though some people disagreed with Janeway's decision, destroying the caretaker's array and upholding Starfleet principle constantly, they fell in line with that. Even what used to be the Marquis, and it was very difficult to watch that episode, Equinox, because you could see the ease in how the crew of the Equinox will come like the ease of which that they stepped into what they were doing, and they didn't just compromise the Prime Directive, they threw it out of the window. And
threw it out the airlock.
And with that, they threw away part of their humanity. And it was so difficult watching that and having Janeway struggle with how to deal with that, because I mean, it was completely evident that she didn't even want to consider basically abusing another race for their own benefit. But the struggle of how to deal with Ransom and his crew, and the Janeway's crew, the crew of Voyager, they were right behind her with it. And that was a very emotional episode, and it posed a lot of questions about like as a viewer. It posed a lot of questions as to our own humanity. Like, if we were under a captain like Ransom, would we have fell in line with him and gone down that route? Or would we have stood against him and faced the consequences of possibly being killed or put off the ship? Or spending the entire journey in the brig? It does pose a lot of questions about humanity in general as well. And that was a very important episode.
And just kind of bringing up that we talked about it in an episode a while back when we were talking I think it was close to the finale of Lower Decks, is saying, is Rudolph Ransom Jack Ransom's father? It was something that I was hoping it was going to be discussed. It never was. I don't know if even the writers had thought of that when they gave the name of Ransom to the Freeman's first officer. Because I mean, he's got the build and the looks and all that. Saying it could be. He never talks about his dad, so
It's possibly why.
Since y'all was talking about the specific episode, about the one thing that sets everything different among what Janeway and stuff about the Equinox episode and stuff and everything. I look at it from almost a different perspective, in a sense. And when people argue about the whole Ransom and Janeway thing and stuff, and then when Janeway confronted him, and he says, Regulation 3, paragraph 12, in the event of immediate disaster, a Starfleet captain is authorized to prevent the basically saying, to prevent the deaths of his or her crew by any justifiable means. He used, Starfleet regulation, which I looked it up. It is true. That's a
of course you
Starfleet
looked it up.
regulation. I remembered it, and I had to go back, and I was like, you know what? I remember hearing about. I remember that and everything. But that goes to show you too. In DS9, not to get off off technically and everything. Was that the third season, past tense, when they got Cisco, Bashir, and Dax got
Dax.
transported back to San Francisco in the literally
2024.
probably just last year. Cisco and Bashir had an argument about the same thing about like how far as human beings go, what would they do to sacrifice themselves to survive? Will they literally behave like Cardassians? You know, fight like Klingons, stuff like that. And you look at too, I know Quark made a general reference one time at, how he described, human beings and stuff. He said, human beings are wonderful people. As long as you keep their glasses full, their
And the belly's
bellies full, and the whole suite's running and stuff. Their creature comfort. You take those away, you will have them almost as bloodthirsty as a Klingon.
Mm-hmm.
So you look at you throw in you look at these humans on the Equinox and stuff and everything else, and their creature comforts and stuff was taken away, just like Voyager's. Voyager now adapted because, in a sense, their ship was better equipped to handle deep space. Equinox wasn't.
Yeah, the
Ransom
Nova
was
class.
thrown in. It was a mid-range ship. It wasn't for like a long distance exploratory vessel and stuff. Ransom and his that's in that gray area. Even he struggled with that gray area. Yes, they did kill species, to get them closer to home. And that goes against every general principle, of what Starfleet and Federation principles, values and stuff and everything. But I just read that regulation and stuff, and I remember, you know, that when you are cut off from those that judge you and stuff, how far will you go to survive? It reminds me of a real life of a real incident that happened back in the 70s. I don't know if anybody remember. It was an airplane that crashed in the Andes Mountains, and the survivors, after their food ran out, and they was dwindling with their rations and stuff and everything else. The story goes they turned to cannibalism, and it's like, wow, do we humans revert back to our most primitive basic you know way of life to survive and stuff and everything in that particular episode and stuff and everything else that we seen, when Janeway confronted Ransom and stuff. Ransom was put in such a you know unique way that both him and Janeway set a course towards the Alpha Quadrant, but on different trajectories and stuff and everything. Because he asked her, "Did y'all run into the Quantum Guard or something like that?" And she said no. And he was like, he lost about a third of his crew to them. When he ordered the ship, ordered them to go full speed into their space, and stuff. And you see how they dealt with the whole thing about like there were people in that gray area of but then we already know that there are some people who just did not care about they was like, we don't care, we will just go back. His first officer you know was like, who cares, we're gonna do it, we're gonna get back home no matter who we sacrifice and stuff and everything else. And they end up fighting each other, basically two Federation starships in the Delta Quadrant fighting each other and stuff and everything. Of course, Voyager was tactically superior to
As
the
a
noble,
tactically
you know.
superior, there's a regulation for that. When there's two ships, one that has the tactical superiority, that captain has the authority to make the calls.
If there is not a senior, a flag officer around. So the command decision falls to the captain with the tactical superiority, which was Voyager at that time. Voyager was more powerful than Equinox and stuff. And I look at that and I see, you know, those are one of the aspects about Janeway that, you know, I was just like, oh wow, Janeway, she's basically told, you know, she said, let me be blunt to Chakotay, and they would say, you know, she said she's gonna hunt him down. She was gonna make him pay. She was going.
Uh-huh.
She
She
was really
was
going to go. She was going to go after him, you know,
she
with vengeance
yeah,
and
she
stuff
is
and
going to
everything.
she is going to all Ahab on him.
And you know,
Yeah.
Chakotay, he held back. He was like, you know, this is not you. Her and Chakotay in that whole thing, they never seen them really came to blow. But even he was taken back by just how much, you know, she was, you know, like, oh my goodness, you got this blood feud in your, you know, stuff and everything. And she explained why she felt like that and everything. And she was basically saying that she's judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to, you know, these Starfleet officers because they basically violated everything that she uphold. And she felt betrayed that, you know, people and stuff and everything else. So she felt like it was her morally duty to you know, to pass judgment on them and stuff and everything. But, you know, not to get too much, and I don't want to take too long and stuff, but
Yeah, because we're focusing too hard on one episode right now. We got
one
several other
episode.
good ones to talk about.
Exactly. There was a lot after that. There was a lot of, you know, I seen some redemption, and it's not saying much redemption, but like some patches between her and Chakotay after that and everything. As you saw, you know, especially in the one episode where Voyager became, you know, literally different parts of the ship was fracturing time and stuff, and
Shattered.
Chakotay was the only one bouncing and stuff and everything. And he had to remind her, you know, because she was basically was going to do something that violated the Temporal Prime Directive, and he had to like basically was real blunt with her and stuff and everything else, and told her, you know, you cannot do this. This is everything that you think you want to do. It will damage and ruin all the other species that they had encountered that they helped and stuff and everything else. He named off a lot of stuff. And then she said, she asked him, I know before they, you know, went through, she asked him, how close do we get? You know, she
Yeah.
asked Chakotay, how close do they, you know, become in the 7 years that, you know, and he just basically, he left it, he just didn't tell her. He left it at, you know, close, but not too close in a sense.
There are some
I
lines we never cross. That were his words.
and
I
you know what?
think.
There are two pieces. One, Janeway couldn't allow this to continue because there was only at the time two Starfleet vessels in the Delta Quadrant, and their behavior would reflect on Voyager. You know, oh, is this how Starfleet behaves? You kill aliens to save yourself? Well, then Voyager must be doing the same thing. So she had to rectify. You know, no matter who we are, no matter who we meet, we uphold these values. To Dave's point, moving on beyond Equinox, um, Voyager's Captain Kathryn Janeway, has herself broken the Prime Directive on many occasions, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
that forces us to look at the ethics behind. You know, every time Picard or Cisco or Kirk or any of them broke the Prime Directive, there was always some moral, ethical reason why they believed it was the right thing to do, and yet, the Prime Directive is there to prevent good intentions from becoming catastrophic. Good intentions, you know, the best of intentions. Hey, I meant to save this species. In fact, we saw it on Voyager with the Vardois. Remember the aliens that were
Yeah.
asleep? They were, you know, and then in Talaxian, Vardois
Dragon
met
Teeth, the episode Dragon Tooth.
drag, yeah.
Dragon Chief.
And so Voyager, you know, went in with the best of intentions, right, breaking the Prime Directive, and look what happened. And that is specifically why And I'm really glad that Star Trek showed a breaking of the Prime Directive and then negativity happening as a result, and allowing that to allow the Voyager crew to recenter and say, you know what, that's why the Prime Directive is there. We effed up,
Was in effect.
and to own it. And yeah, we effed up. You know what? Next time we want to save somebody because we think we're morally justified in what we're doing, we need to take a step back and be Starfleet.
Speaking of moral dilemmas, moral justifications, it kind of brings up a big topic. Tuvix. See, the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the one. There's just like so many quandaries that she and I
Lower
can't even think
Decks
of
pokes fun at this too.
Oh, I know. It's pretty messed up, but yeah, Lower Decks had no qualms in poking fun at anything and saying that Q episode, Tawny says, "We don't have time for this BS Q. Shove off." but Janeway, she had to make the tough call to say because Tuvix was around for a couple of weeks on the ship. He was forming friendships and trying to build relationships with other crew members, but all in all, saying Tuvix was an accident by merging Tuvok and Neelix. And even though he exhibited qualities of both those characters, Kes wanted Neelix back and Janeway wanted Tuvok back. So but the crew kind of fell in line with her decision. But the way the episode ended, just the way that just that moral weight that was over her. So glad to have you back, and she just scooted out of sick bay, and that was the end of the episode. And we never, unfortunately, with the episodic nature, the episodic nature of the series, future writers didn't really follow up on that until Tuvix on Lower Decks.
Can you imagine what would have happened if they would have merged Tuvok and Kes? With Kes's eventual powers and her ability, and of course the Vulcan. That could have been messy. Anyway, I digress. It's just a fun thought experiment.
Because you mentioned about Tuvix and stuff. The episode, do y'all remember the episode Nothing Human?
Mm-hmm.
Where B'Elanna got attacked by an alien creature and it was stuck to her for the duration of the episode. And the doctor had to come up with a way to, get the creature off her without killing the creature, because he didn't want to kill the life form, but it was using her to survive and stuff. In that episode, they dealt with, because B'Elanna was out. She basically told the doctor, she didn't want the Cardassian, hologram to be helping, because it was, the Cardassian
animosity.
Yeah. So, excuse me. Hang on one moment.
I think I know where you're going with this. Is this going to have anything to do with Joseph Minglay?
Sorry about that. I heard a cough. So
I said, is this going to have anything to do with Joseph Minglay?
No, not that.
Oh, okay.
Not that.
Okay.
I'm going to go in that area. I'm going to say this.
Okay.
The thing about this particular episode too, about Janeway's decision, she made the final decision that went against B'Elanna's decision. If you guys remember, because B'Elanna said, no. And, it came down to, the decision, I guess, who was fighting for B'Elanna's rights versus, I think it was Tom. It was Tom versus the doctor's right. And it was talking about, he got to respect the patient's wishes. And, they was arguing about that. And, Janeway was sitting there listening to both sides. And she made the ultimate decision that B'Elanna's life was going to be saved above all else, using the Cardassian, doctor method. And it worked. But I remember at the end where B'Elanna was in her room quarters, and Janeway went to go check for her, and you could just see that B'Elanna was just, she wasn't so much disgust, but she felt so betrayed in a
Yeah.
sense. And
I
the conversation and stuff like it. And I just looked at that, and Janeway knew that, in a sense, I'm gonna let you talk, Tyson. Janeway knew that that's the response that she's gonna get, but she made the ultimate decision that went against, the patient's wishes. And that's another little thing that, you could just say, somebody like a judge, in a sense, saying to, somebody wants to take the life support away, or keep them on life support, or to save their life, something like that, and everything else. Ultimately, somebody had to make the decision, which was Janeway.
I do
And
have
the
to
thing
drop
is,
in just a few minutes, so I want to say one last thing before I have to drop. It's getting time for my net. Um, I will go ahead and make the comparison to Joseph Minglay, who, for those who don't know, was a Nazi doctor back in the concentration camps, and he performed a lot of very unnecessary and very cruel medical experiments.
yeah,
Um, Very cruel. How long, if we put people in a decompression tank and remove the atmosphere, how long will they live? How long can you know doing open body surgery without any kind of anesthetic, etc. How much pain can people endure before they die? It was horrible. He was called Dr. Death. And it was just the worst kind of thing. And out of that, some medical knowledge came. Now here's the dilemma. Those people are long dead. The medical knowledge exists. But if we use it, we're we're at least tacitly approving of what the man did, right? Because we're using that knowledge to save people now.
Yeah.
And
not
the flip side of the coin is we let somebody die even though this knowledge exists to save them. And so that's the moral dilemma, right? It's like by using it, we're justifying what he did. By not using it, we have knowledge and we're going to let somebody die and we're not going to use the knowledge because of how that knowledge was acquired. And I think that's kind of what this episode was really speaking to, right? It's like he has the knowledge to save you, but you don't want it because of how it was obtained. And it was literally, in my opinion, a direct link to that Joseph Mengele,
Yes.
the Nazi situation, which it exists in real life. We have medical knowledge. We have to decide whether or not to use it because of where it came from. Now, again, I do have to drop. Thank you guys so much for letting me have the last word before I go. Um, and by the way, great episode. I don't care what anybody says. Great episode.
Well, before you bounce off, just give you a super quick heads up. Next week we're going to be talking Cisco, so we were kind of talking about it already a bit, but saying so, there's a lot of ambiguity and like moral hurdles he had to jump over, but that's going to be next week. But we still got half an hour to go. See you next week, Tyson. We got plenty of slots available, so if you check the YouTube description below, you can click on it. You can join in the conversation. Love to hear your thoughts and ideas as we continue onwards towards talking about Janeway.
By the way, one special thing about this show, which is unique, if you're watching on YouTube right now and you go in the description, you'll see a StreamYard link. You can click on that, and only this show allows you to click and join the show live on camera, so you can sit here and talk with us. Other
Yes,
shows don't do that. They only allow you to participate through the
the
comment
chat.
section. So here you can actually join audio, video, join live, come on camera, and talk with us.
Or you
That
can't talk. Yeah, you can talk on. You can talk with your camera off too if you're camera shy, but you
sure.
can still partake because as you saw, if I have to scratch my ear, I can turn my camera off, but still partake.
But you can join the conversation. I mean, actually join the conversation. This is a great show. Bye, guys.
See you
Take your
next week.
time.
you soon, darling. Love you.
Oops, someone's
Oh.
coming in the apartment.
But no, the moral dilemmas that Janeway had to face throughout those 7 years. I mean, a lot of people that I've spoken to in the Trek community over the years, they actually don't agree with what Janeway did with 7 of 9.
Oh yeah, there was a lot because a lot of
Yeah.
bias towards the Borg and all that. And
Well, yeah, but as well, in a way, when Janeway severed
uh-oh.
are linked to the collective, and then Seven's transition, Seven's transition from Borg back to human. Yeah, of course, Seven was going to try and contact the collective. It's all she knew. But when the things that Seven was saying to Janeway when she was locked in the brig were absolutely correct. I completely understood where Seven was coming from, but I also understood where Janeway was coming from. She was disallowing Seven's right to choose because she was assimilated at a very young age. The Borg was literally all she knew. And so she didn't have that capacity to be able to make that decision herself with a clear mind and logically. She was just like, I can't hear the collective. I need to get back to them. And even though, everything that Seven said to Janeway was absolutely correct, Janeway was also proved right in the things that she was saying. And the dilemma with that, and then also when they came across the cube of children, and when obviously each of them is at a I
Remy.
can't remember, Rebbe and was it Azan?
Yeah.
Yeah, yay, go me. Sorry, I get so proud when I remember things. Yay. But some viewers were just like, why have you done this? You should have just sent them back to the collective, even though the collective was through with them. And it. I have so much respect for Janeway. What she had to face, and I have a lot of respect for her crew as well for following her and for having her back as well. But the fact that she was basically like the mother to her crew, it was more than just captain and then the rank and file under her. She really was. I have very little of those light bulb moments, but it's a very big achievement when I do have a light bulb moment. But she wasn't just their captain by the end of it. She was like a parental figure to them all.
Even Q called her out on that. You're certainly a mother to this crew.
Exactly, and I mean, if Q can see that, obviously we saw that. And even though it was shown multiple times in every episode that the crew had Janeway's back, she showed on many occasions that she also had theirs. She defended Icheb. She went with him. She was willing to take on his punishment in Q2. When Icheb was injured and like the miniature Q, she was willing to take on the responsibility for his transgression because he was in her care. And then when Seven went back to the collective in Dark Frontier, she went straight after her. And the amount of times that she went above and beyond to help her crew, her family, was unbelievable. And it just showed that she was more than a captain. I mean, all right, yeah, a captain will, try and save their crew members, but she did it for other reasons than obligation.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of mentioned that because I was thinking about Dark Frontier, and when she was having that discussion with Naomi, saying there are 3 things a captain must do: keep your shirt tucked in, go down with the ship, and never leave a member of your crew behind.
Exactly.
I want to expand on that. Do you guys remember the episode? It was the beginning of the fifth season. It's called Night, where
Yeah.
Voyager was in the expanse of space where there's no stars and stuff. And it's the first counter that they encountered the Malon. Well, there was a part in, I think it was in Act 3 or something, or you could say Act 4 or something, I don't know. When Tuvok and Chakotay was having a discussion and stuff. And, Chakotay was asking Tuvok for his advice about Janeway. And he basically told her he's been observing her for the last, 4 years or so. He said something on the line that, Captain Janeway methods are unorthodox. It is her strength as a leader, but unfortunately, it is also her greatest weakness. And
Yeah.
I think Chakotay put it like, stubborn as a Klingon. Miley put it as Tuvok said.
Yeah.
That right there goes to show you she do have some. Tuvok is probably the one who observed her the most. He knows her, he called her, he even said, basically called her reckless at one point. I remember that episode. I remember at one point he was like, this is a somewhat reckless course of action,
Yeah.
And it's so funny how Tuvok, he had observed her behavior because he mentioned her first time as a commanding officer. I think it was lieutenant commander on a mission that she sent an away team. And the away team, I guess something happened. The shuttle was damaged. The away team was hurt and stuff and everything else. And she felt so responsible that, that they got hurt that the next day she went back by herself to, completed the volcanic survey on an active moon or something and everything else by herself, and that's where Tuvok, started psychologically analyzing her behavior and stuff and everything. It's like, that's the kind of person she is and stuff and everything. And, basically he said it's her greatest weakness and stuff and everything. So here's a little fun fact too about, did you guys know, and I'm not sure if you guys know, it's always been my curiosity because I always thought since Voyager next to the Equinox was the first Federation starship in that part of the galaxy, how many species did they encounter? Not the species that they already knew about, like the Cardassians, the Klingons, the Ferengis we seen, the Romulans, but just how many new species we came across through the entire tenure of Voyager.
I don't know the number, but I'm sure you do.
Between, I think, 65 or 66.
I thought it'd be a little bit more than that. I thought it'd be at least a low 100 or so.
You would
Well,
think
at least, on camera, I can understand that because off camera they probably encountered.
Yeah, they had more stuff like that. But the ones we seen in like the episode and stuff like that, not to mention like they had mentioned too, like in passing and stuff and everything. But like that's what I came up with because I had to diligently go back and look and re-see, and I was like, oh wow, it's about 66.
I was just gonna say because through the forum, I mean, Kate Mulgrew, she just at the time of the shooting of that episode, if people don't know, she quit smoking. So she was going through some
Yeah.
withdrawals, some real withdrawals. So she was able to do some method acting and use those that issue
Yes.
or Nick fits, as a lot of people call them, on camera. So
Wow.
add a layer of realism to all that crap that they were sticking in her head and whatnot.
See, that's another reason why that's one of my favorite Voyager episodes. That's like in my top 10 Voyager episodes, because she didn't really need to put much work into acting that really big scene at, like, towards the end, where Tuvok did say that this is a much more reckless course of action than I expected from you. And, you know, I mean, yeah, sometimes, granted, she was reckless, but in that episode, she really was, and it paid off. And but she did it in her recklessness and some of her unorthodox ways were on point at the same time. That, you know, and that episode, Scientific Method, what she did was, yeah, it was just like, holy shit, love, what are you doing? But I mean, Janeway even said, "Isn't this what you wanted? Pumping up my dopamine levels to see how far, you know." And then she's just like, "Well, take a seat."
Yeah,
And
you can see here you get the final data.
But the thing is, even though she was being an absolute crazy woman in that scene, the crew were, even though Tuvok was just like, "Are you sure about this?" You know, and there was a couple of them that were like, "Are you sure?" They all stood right behind her, and they were in for it. You know, and they fully supported that course of action and did everything possible to keep the ship in one piece. You know, and it was actually kind of a beautiful moment within that recklessness, where, you know, crazy captain, and then the crew was just like, let's just jump on the crazy train.
See where she's
You know,
see where she's taking us. Yeah,
well,
flying
yeah,
into
'cause I mean,
the
oh, fair enough. They didn't really have a choice but to jump on the crazy train with an even crazier driver, but nobody objected. They asked if she was sure, a couple of them, you know, and then Tuvok made the reckless comment, but it nobody questioned her, as in, you know, you're going to have to get somebody else to do this, because me, myself, and I, you know, I want to take an escape pod and get out of here. Nobody even considered that. They were fully there with her, riding that crazy train through that pulsar, you know, and
binary star, yeah.
it was beautiful.
Yeah, it's the
Speaking in the cloud, in the episode of Cloud, Neelix was like, "Oh man, like, they have a really good vessel, and they want to check out every little nook and cranny to see what kind of anomalies and stuff and everything." And he questioned, he was like, "Me and Kets are gonna go wait on my shuttle until y'all finish the stuff." You know, he's basically saying, you know, I am so sick of this and everything else. That was in the episode of Cloud. But I want to make this one point really quick and everything. The episode, I think it was episode 4, the phase, the fade, when they encounter the Vidians, when they
Yeah.
found the comment at the end and stuff like that. When Janeway learned who the Vidian were, what they do, the kind of method that they, and then, you know, that gray area, that morally ethical thing about, like, you know, you kill others to save yourself because you guys been struggling with, you know, this phage, this disease and stuff like that for, you know, 2,000 years and stuff. Well, when she gave them the final warning, she basically, it was in the early part when I first watched it, because when I first watched it, I was like, wow, she really mean it, because, you know, she said, any member of this crew, if, you know, any hostile act or any member of the crew, you know, will be met with the most deadliest, you know, retribution that she could come up with, from their species and stuff. Now, fast forward to season 2 in Alliances. If you guys remember, in Alliances, it was opening where they was getting attacked by the Kazons. Normally and stuff, and everything, because Kazon wanted it, because at that time Sesko, we already knew about Sesko and stuff and everything else. So someone died. They had a casualty, and it was a Maquis member. You can say former Maquis member. At that time, it was a Maquis member because Maquis still existed. And they had a memorial and stuff and everything else. And then, some of the Maquis confronted Janeway in the mess hall and stuff. And they basically said, just give them what they wanted and stuff and everything. Make alliance and stuff. Chakotay basically convinced her to seek out, one of the Kazon sects to make an alliance with, or whatever, stuff like that. Basically, they ran it, and then we first learned about the trade. When we found out who the trade were, how the backstory of, the Kazons. And in that episode too, that it brings back to what something Dave said earlier and everything, that they try to, in a sense, not try to, but her crew pushed her in a sense to kind of go that went against Starfleet regulations about hey, look, these Maquis, they will follow you and stuff and everything, but that's that one time where you start seeing fracture, because a lot of them were going to Chakotay. They was talking, you could tell they was talking. It's like, we got to do something about this. I mean, the ship is getting attacked. We lost one of our own, and they was just very upset about how things were and stuff. And you saw, that little, there was a small break in the sense of cohesion, not as cohesion, but they was starting to kind of question her. I remember just remember when the episode came out and everything, I could say, ooh, I could start to see Starfleet officers. I don't know what they was thinking, the Starfleet personnel, but the Maquis personnel, you could see that they were, they was grinning their teeth and like, we got to do something about this. And it was like, wow. But then at the end, we realized all the what happened in that particular episode in Alliance and stuff and everything. But that just go to show you too that Janeway had to actually prove to everybody on the ship that you guys gotta trust what I am doing. Trust what I am doing is in the right interest for everybody on this ship. It's not about me. It's about me trying to get you home to your families and stuff and everything else. And she had to make that point at the end about the best allies that they ever had is the Prime Directive himself, because they went against their prime director and everything else. They was trying to form alliances with one species that actually was not a really good species, but we already know that the Kazon, who the Kazon was, but the trade, they was something else. And that just goes to show you that she basically said the best ally that she ever knew was the Prime Directive itself and stuff and everything else. And she had to remind them, that they can't think like that anymore. They can't go that way and stuff and everything. That's another little thing that I remember about Janeway.
Well, I was saying, Travis, you touched earlier with the events that, excuse me, Janeway had to endure with crap, what was the episode now? Ha ha ha, I'm blanking. Oh, Equinox. No, yeah, talk about the Equinox when she started starting to get a little head buddy with Chakotay. Chakotay calling her out on some of her motives. It's not the first time. Scorpion, the two-parter, when Janeway was injured after the attack on the Borg cube, and Chakotay, when Janeway was on death's door, essentially, he cut his losses and say, "Screw the Borg, let's get the hell out of here." And then he faced the repercussions of those actions when she's like, "Oh my God, you're alive! What the? Oh crap, I'm in trouble."
Was another headbutting thing between her and Chakotay and stuff and everything.
I think that was the biggest one, in all honesty. But I was actually going to bring that up. Like unholy alliances, so to speak. But she did what she felt was right, and it did kind of sort of pay off in the end.
But no, go ahead.
I mean, one episode where I think that Janeway is at her best is Macrocosm. And I absolutely love that. I mean, Ellen Ripley, eat your heart out, because that episode did give me kind of like alien vibes. But
Moopsie alert got 10 minutes ago.
I mean, in that episode of Macrocosm, Janeway was like full on badass, and she went like full on military in a way, but even within that, she still now I know it's easy for me to say as a woman, but she managed so well within that to still maintain her femininity, and she was basically on her own. I mean, I know that she had the Doctor's help at one point, and Neelix at the beginning, but it really showed her with basically the episode just basically revolving around Janeway rather than her captaining. Captaining went out the window in that episode, and she was just in survival mode. And that, for me, really did showcase her as a person, not as a captain, not as a woman, but as a person. And within all that, she still maintained everything. She still maintained her role as a captain, her role as a woman, and also her role as a warrior as well, and a mother to her crew, because she was doing everything she could to save her crew. And that, for me, is one of my favorite Janeway moments. And it was so well done as well. It really was. And I mean, when she stuck that knife into that
organism
thing, organism. That's the word. Thank you. When she stuck that blade in, the look on her face. That was like, it was almost like it was so satisfying for her, but it was so satisfying for me to watch. And it was one of those moments that was just, it couldn't be repeated, even if it was repeated in a different format, like later on. That moment, I mean, she was exhausted. She was almost at the end of the fight, but she'd been injured as well. And she'd been infected, and the Doctor used her as a guinea pig. Just all what she went through in that short space of time. It was like a release for her to stick that blade in that organism, and it was so satisfying for me as well, because that was just like, yes, you get out your frustration, girl. That is just like one of my favorite episodes. It's in my top 10, and it is actually my favorite Janeway centered.
There is one other episode I definitely want to bring up before we wrap up, because we only got a few minutes left. But Travis, you had something to say?
the one thing I think, Katie, you touched on a lot of things and stuff about her and everything, but there's one thing that nobody ever talk about, and I noticed that nobody ever talk about when it comes to that. Actually, that fascinated me when I was back in the '90s when I was watching it coming out and everything else. I could see the difference from Kirk, Picard, and Cisco. She was a scientist. She was actually a science. They all had their moments about science, but she was actually her background in Starfleet was she was a scientist. If you notice throughout the entire series and stuff and everything, especially even the early episodes, she was a scientist. She did hands on stuff. She did analysis. She helped Balana in an experiment when they was looking they was I forgot what the episode was, but when they was running some experiment in engineering and stuff like that of something about a star and stuff and everything. She didn't have a problem getting her hands in the muck with the others and stuff and everything else. You saw the other captains and stuff and everything. They gave the issue orders and stuff and everything. But Janeway, she actually did things like
She's more hands-on.
yeah, she was a very more hands-on, and she could, especially like I remember the one episode too. It literally was um episode the third episode. It was when it was literally when they was traveling back towards the Alpha Quadrant. It was literally they was like trying to find ways to sustain their power source and stuff and everything else, and they went into
A
you know
singularity.
a singularity. Was that a class 4 singularity? Was it a class 4 singularity? Um, it was so funny watching her and Balana interact with each other with the whole technical things and stuff and everything. They basically they figure out and everything else and stuff. And you hear her, she had more insight. And then she looked at Paris when Paris said something about blah 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 blah, and she was like, Balana, you're with me. He was like, Captain, you need your best pilot. She was like, if you had any of your credentials in temporal mechanics or whatever and stuff and everything else, you know,
Yeah.
it's not you. You need it at the helm and stuff like that because he didn't understand, the nature of their stuff and everything. But her and Balana did, and they understood each other's stuff. That's very early on that I seen how different she were compared to them. But
Yeah.
me,
Yeah, we're running out of time, but gotta give mention to this episode where Janeway lets her hair down. Bride of Chaotica.
Oh,
oh,
yes.
Bride of Chaotica.
Say, remember, you're the queen.
Oh, I love that line. I absolutely love that line. And the look on her face. Oh, it was just, yeah.
Oh, even though she was totally not prepared for going into the holodeck to play
Yeah.
Arachnia, she just ate it up and was having
Oh, yeah.
Chaotica eaten out of her hands. And at the end of the
Oh,
episode,
yeah.
you know what?
That.
The wedding's off. Bam.
Exactly.
You see in that episode as well, she really delves into her femininity as well. And that is just, and the fact that they did it in, am I right in when I remember that they actually shot a lot of that in black and white?
Yeah, because
yeah, and it was brilliant. I mean, and then as well, she had to kind of sort of take on that role again in Shattered.
Mm-hmm.
And she had no idea what it was all about because she was from the very beginning of the timeline, so to speak. But she really, really both times, and I've got to give Janeway credit more for Shattered in a way because she had no idea what she was stepping into through the whole episode, especially in the holodeck, and she was absolutely brilliant in both, and she will always be the queen.
Mm-hmm.
She will.
I think that is a pretty good way to to end this episode. I mean, it was a great topic. I'm glad I decided to go with it. So, as I kind of threw it up there early before Tyson had to bounce, is that next week we're going to talk about Captain Sisko, saying he too went through a lot of stuff. It's starting as a reluctant commander at the time, saying he needed to take over a station. He had severe animosity towards Picard when he was assimilated by the Borg. But yeah, so we're going to talk Sisko next week. So based on the conversation we had here, I'm thinking we're going to have a good conversation about Sisko as well. And then the following week, we're going to do to Picard on Captain Picard Day, June the 16th. And then we got 2 more Mondays after that. So I think we're going to do Pride related stuff since it is Pride Month. So yay.
Yay! I even got my pride scarf out as well.
So I even got my little. Was wearing this yesterday at kickballs, and that was a lot of fun. Even though my team won, we lost. They had fun with some fellowship at a local tap house, which I did not drink any alcohol.
I love that.
Yeah,
And I'm surrounded by pride.
but yeah, saying it, I'm definitely going to do the kickball again in the fall. So that's gonna. And I was 2 for 4 at yesterday's game. That was a personal best, and I was just like, yay, progress. But yeah, any quick closing thoughts from either of you, or are we calling it good?
You should call it
Janeway's
good.
my favorite captain.
All righty. Well,
She's the queen.
until next week, may Spock be with you.